The interspecies marketplace, where all sorts of exotic creations, creatures, foodstuffs, and everything is sold here, everyone would think that it'd be a complete mess, but in actuality, it's surprisingly clean. When entering, you have to remember the main rule, and the rule is if the money's there, they just don't care. They'll sell anything. The majority of what's sold is just used for the basics, food and entertainment usually. With the entertainment portion, that's why some of the most dangerous creatures are actually on display, usually in very strong cages. Yet when it comes to food, this is kept away from the entertainment. Each one is compartmentalized for good reason. Some of the foodstuffs sold are from different worlds, different plants, fruits and vegetables mainly. There's also some animals, either intact or not, as they're hung up on display. Yet if you're looking for something else, anything else, you can always find it for sale here as well. Due to its location, one of the most common conversation starters is, you very rarely see humans out this way. Whenever one does show up, most vendors want to be extremely nice. This is due to the fact that in Seoul, they only contain items that can be obtained in Seoul. And God help any who try to sneak in and take it. After the awakening due to the Cataphract's war, humans mostly stay within their territory and rarely ever venture out. The Cataphract had actually invaded Seoul, in particular Earth, trying to force the population in submission. This way, they can have a slave population in the billions that they could sell, trade, or simply work to death, or, of course, consume if nothing else. As it turns out, the humans didn't take kindly to any of that. Though some populations dropped to their knees upon seeing these blaze orange amphibious reptiles in their midst, it only took one bullet firing before the entire population of certain areas of the planet began to dismember and destroy the entire invasion group. The humans were actually so angry that any cataphract that landed on the planet never left. The only ship to actually get away was in orbit and was being fired upon by directed energy weapons that they didn't even know humans had. The captain at that point had no choice but to flee as fast as they could. It is believed by some that a few may have actually survived and are still on the surface, but nothing has made it to the market, so they can't confirm. As word of a personal transport ship landing was very common, no one even flinched due to this. This is normal. Yet once they found out that it was a human personal transport, everyone took notice. When a human walked out of his ship, everyone expected the metal skin they call an exosuit to be covering this entire creature. Yet this time, the human walked out with simple clothing on. It walked with what looked like a satchel over its shoulder and a large piece of metal strapped to the side of its leg. The moment his feet touched the deck of the space station, the man closed his ship and set it to self-defense mode to stop anybody from stealing his goods. After which, the human turned towards the market and looked annoyed. All the peddlers were staring and waiting for him to get close. Thankfully, the security of the venue saw this and berated everybody, making them step back. This wasn't really for the human safety, but they actually wanted to see what the human had in trade. To that end, they didn't want to upset it. The man simply walked through the market. The multi-level space station was surprisingly clean. He paused a few times just to be like, wow, how do they do that? Especially with all the creatures sliding their tentacles everywhere, flying with wings, you know something's going to be come off as they move around. He looked over from some with their maw seemingly pushing around things. Other creatures were skittering around on insect legs. To a human, this was more like an interplanetary zoo than a marketplace, but they were still selling things. Walking around, most vendors tried to get his attention, yet the man simply walked around, almost stone-faced, as the dark glasses on his face scanned everything. He could see through those what is edible and what is toxic. He could see what creatures were there just for sport and which ones were for food. Eventually, he found what he was looking for, the tech floor. Continuing his walk, the man walked into each shop. Methodically, he asked to see their best product. Most were scavenged parts from damaged functioning ships, too damaged actually. So damaged that you might as well just throw them out for scrap. Seeing this, the man politely declined and moved along to another shop. This dance continued until he found something interesting. The dealer came out to speak to him, a disgusting insectoid that looked like a giant scorpion, though walking on 4 legs instead of 6. The front claws actually retracted back to show a type of hand that was a mix of tentacles and claws. As the dealer spoke, the massive, triple-layered mandibles open and shut, sometimes rapid, sometimes slow, along with 4 sets of pincer-like protrusions that were clearly meant to pull meat inside his maw. The interesting piece of tech was a regenerative shielding device, and it was about 0.8 meters high, octagonal if you look at it from the top, yet wider at the base than on the bottom. Once deployed, it set out a signal in the form of a frequency that began to regenerate the body. Along with that, anything moving faster than 2.1 miles per hour just can't pass through. The man even tested this, as even though he could pass through, it was like he was pushing his way through cement. The dealer saw the intense gaze of the human as he examined the device with great interest. In order to show off even more, the insectoid dealer told him to have a try and shoot him through the field, motioning to a pulse rifle that was there. Sure enough, every single piece of energy was dispersed and recycled back into the device, making it even stronger. When the man asked, "So, what about ballistics?" the dealer, seemingly cocky, said, "No ballistics get through. I bet my life on it." Without hesitation, the man drew his .50 caliber pistol and fired. The bullet ricocheted off, and this surprised all as the bullet began bouncing away across different decks. Yet no more than the dealer was surprised and shocked as he backed up a little bit and began checking himself to make sure there was no holes. The man holsters his weapon and says, "Works as advertised. How many do you have?" The dealer, seemingly to smile in a way, seemed to almost delight. If he had wings, I'm sure they would have fluttered. The dealer screeched something, and 2 female humanoids walked out of the back, each of them holding another shield generator, and yet they were both just dressed in nothing but rags. The dealer knows the human looking at them both. Then the dealer grabbed them both before they could walk away, lifted them up, and placed them up in front. "You are interested in other products?" the dealer asked. The man stayed as calm as possible, as it was evident the fear and disgust both of the females felt. Both were a strange shade of a yellow or orange, with lime-green eyes that seemed to look away. The solid black hair only seemed to come out of the top of the head, as though it was some sort of strange haircut. Yet under the hair, it looks like horns? Or those ears? It was strange. It was though a strange piece of bone was around the back of their head where no actual hair came out. As the dealer put his tentacled hands all over them, trying to display the different parts, eventually getting to the point of lifting them up from the jaw so they would look the man in the eye. They both saw the man standing there, no eyes behind those dark lenses. They both shied away, yet just as the dealer seemed as though he was going to get mad, the man began to ask about price. At first, it was just the price of the shield generator. The dealer was asking for materials like ingots, but then the man had something else that made the dealer pause. He offered a full pallet of sodium chloride for each generator and 40 kilograms of pork for each generator. To say the least, this was generous. Without hesitation, the dealer pulled up his data device so he can finish the deal. As they're about to sign, the man asked, "What about those 2? motioning to the females. The dealer, trying to be funny, said, "At this price? A pallet of that crop you call, rice. 1 pallet for the 2. He said this sarcastically, as there's no way anybody would agree. Human rice is one of the most sought-after grains in the known universe. The human looked up and said, "Fine, bargained and done." The hero was in shock as the contract pinged on his device. The human turned to leave, yelling, "I'll be back for all items. They had still all better be in working order when I return." The human quickly returned to his ship, set everything on a repulsor lift cart, and headed back. He received a lot of looks as he quickly pushed his cart through the market, some even following him to find out who had actually swindled the human for such wonderful products. Entering the shop, the man was not happy with what he saw. The dealer had actually stripped the 2 females of everything, with the exception of 1 device around the neck. On their bodies, he could see scars and bruises. He lowered the pallets by simply pressing 1 button, pulled the cart back, removing it from underneath the pallets. Looking up at the dealer, the human said, "Here it is. Do you wish to confirm?" After a quick inspection, the dealer smiled. And he smiled by opening up his entire maw and showing all of his definite spikes and fangs and everything else, opening up wide enough as though it looked like he was going to eat the human in front of him. The dealer then closed his mouth and said, "Our deal is complete." The man then reached down to part of the cart and extended a part of the repulsor cart so he could place the shield generators on them. Afterward, he reached out to the females that were perfectly still but hesitant to reach out to him. He picked up each of them one at a time and placed them between the shields. So it literally went shield, female, shield. As the human turned the cart and got ready to go, the dealer handed over the control module for the shock collar, which happened to be the only article of clothing either of the females wore at the moment. The man said, "There's no need for that." Then he reached down, gripped the collar with both hands, and ripped the collar off each of them one at a time. This was a feat of strength that the dealer could not even accomplish with his large body, which is why he's in complete shock as the human simply pushed the cart back to his ship. As he passed others, their comments on why a human would want such disgusting females. Yes, they said disgusting. They said something, why would they want these females? There's no scales, no tentacles, no wings, no pastel colors, no pheromones coming, nothing to get any male's motor running. None of them could figure out why a human would even want them. They both looked malnourished and kept their heads down the entire trip back to the ship. And what surprised most of all is only a few seemed to notice the lack of control collar, but then again, they were both so subdued it didn't really matter. As they were reaching the ship, the 2 females were surprised that the loading ramp actually lowered down before they even reached the ship, and it began to close the moment they were actually on it. They were not even in the ship yet, and now it was beginning to close. They're grateful for this, as both knows the pirates just waiting for an opening, and usually the opening is right as the doors are beginning to open. They would usually rush inside to try and steal the ship, steal the cargo, take anything, and kill anyone who tried to stop them. But the pirates would not have a chance this day. Once inside, the human finally takes off the dark lenses, exposing his gray eyes. As the females sit, only letting their eyes move a little bit, but keeping their heads down, the man walks over, retrieves a pair of items, walks back to the females, and places one item in each of the females' ears. Now, when he speaks, the females pay attention, as this is the first time they understand what the human is saying. The first thing the human says is, "You two look hungry. Come here. Sit." He then walks them over and sits them at the table and puts a very light meal in front of them. He simply says, "Eat slowly," right before he turns away so he can go secure the new shield generators. Then he re-enters, and they have both actually finished their meal, so he gets another plate. This time, something a bit more substantial. The thick beef stew permeates the room with its aroma, making both of the females unconsciously drool. As they eat, he goes to the nanofabricator to program some female clothes. However, he does have to wait until they're done. As they finish their meal, he calls each of them over to stand in front of the machine. With that, they see some sort of green light go over them that makes them think they're about to be cut into pieces, but no, all it does is takes their measurements and proceeds to print out a set of clothes. They're confused at this, as they'd never seen clothing like this, so he explains how they work and unfortunately has to help them put the clothing on. The two are actually surprised with the amount of maneuvering involved to get these clothing on, especially with something they would now learn is called a bra. Once clothed, the man walks towards the bridge, brings the two girls behind him, actually having to wave them both forward, sets them in their seats, and once he gets them buckled in, he sits into the helm and begins to make calls for guidance to leave. As they're leaving the space dock, he asks their names, and he introduces himself as Tony. As they clear the dock, he leans back and says, so how did you two sisters end up on the station anyway? The first one says, it's a long story. Tony replies without turning, it's going to be a long trip. The second one says, also, we are not siblings. Tony turned back after a second to make sure he heard it right, as the translator was having a little bit of difficulty. Then he turned back, left, then right to look at them and said, oh, my mistake. You just look so similar. The first one then said, that is because she is my daughter. Tony spins around to look to his left, then to his right, back and forth several times, and says, but you both look so young. Mother, daughter, not sisters? The first one said, I assure you it's true. Tony's eyes get really wide. Then he flips to his left and looks at the daughter, and she gives a gesture of compliance. At least he thinks it's one. Tony then takes a breath, turns back to the front, and goes, well, ain't that some shit? Then he pauses as they jump to FTL. Once in FTL, he spins around and he says, I know you probably think that I'm your owner, but I don't care for that much. I mean, I could drop you off to your homeworld if you want. Yet looking at each of them, he turns back and forth, and he can see nothing but fear in their eyes at the suggestion. Tony then goes, well, I guess I'll have to teach you both how to use one of these first, as he pulls his pistol out and shows it. That is when he hears one of his alarms go off. Before he spins around, the second one says, they're following us. They're going to catch us. Tony, now looking forward, checks his monitor and says, no, they're not. Not where we're going. Tony turns up the engines and increases beyond light speed, as it seems as though light speed is just a little too slow. The girls can see a holographic heads-up display that says something they can't read. Yet to Tony, he knows the pirates are not going to follow him, as he reads the HUD as it clearly says, Destination, Sol 3. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this short story. Now before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Erica Gem. And I also need to send out some giant thank yous to the supporters of this channel, and those will be Prozac and Pancakes, Sir, SS Demon, MTF Guard, Erica Gem, Guardian Sage, Brian Kemp, The Lockeen, Joseph Blosh, and Douglas Scarborough. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.